Hello coaches, and welcome to this 11 versus 11 formations and systems of play presentation looking at the 1-4-5-1. And my name is David Newbery and I'm joined by my colleague Ian Barker. Hello Ian.
Hello David, pleasure to be here.
So Ian, we're looking at the 1-4-5-1. This is a series of 4 presentations and this is one of those 4 systems and formations. And this is the outline of the session that we will go through today. We're going to first look at introducing the formation. We will be talking about some of the roles and functionality of the different positions, starting off with the numbering system. Then we'll talk about how the system works in a game environment and offer some activities that the coaches potentially could use to coach this particular formation. So, Ian, what we're going to do is start off with looking at the numbering and the basic shape. And I will now turn over the presentation to you to talk about the formation of the 1-4-5-1 in terms of numbering.
Thank you, David. I definitely think that whilst we're dealing with 4 in the back, the orientation of the 5 in midfield, the implications for how the back 4 plays and the lone striker plays is unique to the 4-5-1 formation. So we'll look at that as we go through. When we talk about lines, as we write out the numbers on the team sheet, obviously the first line is our goalkeeper, who's going to be critical, obviously, in defending situations, but equally so as we develop from the back if we indeed decide to play from the back. Our second line should be that back 4, that connected back 4, and we've used our traditional numbering system of the right back being 2, the left back being 3, and 4 and 5 our 2 centre backs. That would be our second line. And when we move into the third line of the 4-5-1, it's pretty clear that we're going to have a wide 7 and a wide 11. And then the trick will be, depending on each coach's interpretation of his or her personnel, is what is the orientation of our middle 3. And what we've shown here is the potential orientation of a 6 deep and an 8 and a 10 high. So we've got that triangle with 1 deep, 2 high. Of course, we can vary that based on our personnel or our preferences, but certainly the consideration of the configuration of that middle 3 is going to be critical in the 4-5-1. And then finally, in the 1-4-5-1 formation, the role of the number 9 and the physical abilities, the cognitive abilities, tactical, and also sort of psychology and spirit and effort of that number 9 is going to be really critical to how this system, how this formation becomes a system. So we'll be looking at that number 9 as we continue through the presentation. And so here we see, with all the lines removed now, how I've chosen to draw up my 4-5-1, my keeper, my back 4 out here, the triangle I discussed of the 3, good width from 7 and 11, and then my number 9 trying to stretch the team. So that's how I would set my formation up initially. And so now as we look to see what might happen, let's say the opponent gets the ball wide as demonstrated here. The full coverage of the field allowed in the 4-5-1 would allow our number 2 to potentially step up, our 7 to double down, and as we can see from the white movement lines, everybody else shifting across the park to cover the immediate pressure of 2 and 7, and then maybe give up a little space here on the weak side, but no real threat at this point because we're not anticipating the opponent being able to get off this side anytime soon.
Now, interestingly, Ian, here we can see all of the movement arrows towards the ball except for one player, the number 9. Can you talk about why you've decided that the number 9 will actually move in the opposite direction?
Yeah, it's a really good question, David. Thank you. So my thesis here would be that with potentially 9 players behind the ball, the number 9 shouldn't necessarily be needed all the time to defend. And he or she's got a lot of work to do when we have the ball. So the idea of actually moving away from where the ball is, to me, would be the possibility that if 2 and 7 and the rest of the team would win it, we want to counterattack as far away from where the opponent was. So having the 9 shift over to the weak side gives us a counterattack option, an outlet option, which I would certainly be looking to explore.
Now we're going to talk about the 5 reasons, or 5 of many reasons that you believe that the 1451 is a good system for a coach to adopt.
Thank you. So one of the things I like about this is that we have this great field coverage in the midfield. So whilst the number 9 is somewhat isolated at times, the potential of supporting runs, be it from the wide places or certainly from midfielders coming on centrally, is really great. So from the opponent's perspective, they have to deal with the number 9, but really supporting runs and supporting movement of the number 9 could potentially come from anywhere across the field. And we'll explore a little bit later how we might exploit the width attack or the central attack.
And it's worth observing here that the number 6, you've actually got, if you were to draw a line, it's probably even just behind the 2 and the 3.
Yeah, that's a very good observation. And the way I would look to use this formation is essentially, once we've got the number 9 attacking, and of course we've got our 5 midfielders, the next people joining in, or sorry, the 4 midfielders would be 2 and 3, and it's actually 4 and 5 who stay home, and the deep center midfield. So after my striker, then the 4 midfielders, in this case 7, 8, 10, 11, the next primary attacking threat would be my fullbacks pushing on beyond the number 6. That would be how I might look to interpret this. We've tried to demonstrate here with this graphic how if we have the 3 in the center of midfield and we're playing, let's say, 4, our opponent has 4 in the midfield, 2 in the center, the numerical advantage is possible. So in the red circle, when we're out of possession, let's really get all 3 of them in there. Let's keep it really tight because we certainly have supporting defensive cover from 7 and 11 in the wide space. And then should we win the ball, if 8 can expand out, 10 can expand out, 6 can find space within the circle, we can really stretch the opponent. So we can kind of gang up on a 2-man midfield when we're trying to win it, and then we can really exploit them when we have won it by demonstrating the ability to contract and expand based on possession. The number 9 is, again, a very critical person here. And so what we want is to our number 9 to try to engage the 2 centre-backs a lot of the time and keep the opponent honest. The challenge for the opponent is not only to worry about the number 9, but if 7 and 11 are potentially a little bit withdrawn, what are the implications for the opposing fullbacks? Do they step up and leave space behind, or do they stay where they are and allow 7 and 11 to have space in front of them? And the same would apply if 8 and 10 are able to push forward. And so what David's captured here with these white movement arrows is the ability for 7, for example, here a 7, to go in or out and really start to compromise the decision-making of this fullback. And so how we support that number 9 by overloading lines and by different types of movement is a critical implication in possession of the 5-man midfield. One of the things I would like to see when we get into this type of system, or as we make it a system, is the ability to be a very compact defensive unit. And so what we've demonstrated here is we've potentially seen the ball go to the opposing goalkeeper, and because of perhaps circumstance, scoreline, maybe we're winning, maybe we're fatigued, it's the end of the half, any number of variables, the team that I'm coaching has decided to start their restraining line at the top of the center circle. And so we're allowing the opponent to have all this ball in front of us in their back third. And what we're saying is, wait till you get to the middle of the field and we're prepared to confront you. And you can see here that our back line is pushed up too. So we've made the field very short, and we've also made it very narrow. Now, of course, the opponent will possess happily in the back, and they maybe try to get out here and here, and we can always shift across. But we've demonstrated to the opponent that we're going to be really tight as a solid unit and make it very difficult to penetrate through us by setting a restraining line that is fairly low in the block. And then some other things that we can do with this system, because remember the number 9 is somewhat challenged here to defend by themselves. So in this example, we've allowed the goalkeeper to play out to the left back. And what's happened is our number 11 and our number 9 have stacked up quite high on the weak side. And so what we're asking, or what we're suggesting now, is that this opponent really has no option but to either go forward there or diagonally inside. What this opponent cannot do is switch through the back, because we've actually defended through 9 and 11, the weak side. And so what we're starting to do is make play predictable. And essentially, as this ball gets played and we cover players across here, we're suggesting that the field is perhaps cut in half now, and we know where the opponent's going to go. So making play predictable is an important feature of this for us.
And Ian, the point here with regard to the run of the number 9 is that the number 11 has pressed very high to the fullback to prevent the ball being rolled out to the right back. But by doing so, has left a big space in front of the right winger for the opponent. So the number 9, you've trained the number 9 to move into the space to make that pass or throw by the goalkeeper much more challenging. And as a result, the obvious option for them is to play to the left.
Absolutely. I mean, in this situation, because of the, to your point, the shift of number 9, we've made it virtually impossible for the goalkeeper to go down this right flank. And that is what we're trying to do. If the goalkeeper is insistent in going here or perhaps into here, then I would say we've got a good numerical situation to counter right back. If the goalkeeper does somewhat comply with our defensive shape, at the minimum, we've made play predictable and we're ready to go. So I think we have an either-or type situation here, but it would have.
And how that applies to coaching within the game environment. So we're going to show diagrams now that show 11v11, or at least, very least, on a full field.
Yeah, and so critical, again, with all the presentations we've made in this series, is referring back to the principles of TAC, which we feel are really somewhat immutable. So the idea being that the player with the ball is looking to penetrate on the dribble, pass, or shot and hurt the opponent. The next players, the most immediate players to the player in ball, are looking to support, essentially help. So maybe that's the language we use with our youth players. The person on the ball, how do you help that person? The rest of the team, be it a 7-a-side team, a 9-a-side team, are looking to move and offer width to break the opponent apart. And then, of course, the special sauce, as we sometimes refer to it, is this improvisation, creativity, surprise component, which can be taught and can be developed, but of course is very often at the highest levels the domain of a truly special player. So those are our principles of attack. So what we see here is that in most cases in the 1-4-5-1, the central striker, the number 9, should be our main goal scoring threat because of the high position she or he maintains, and hopefully they have finishing ability. The other way they can play, of course, is as a hold-up player, more of a target player to bring other players in. So sometimes the number 9, if possible, could check into space to allow players to run beyond him or her. But in this case, all we've diagrammed is the simple idea of our central striker getting up and high on the shoulders of the two central defenders, excuse me, a ball in the midfield, a penetrating pass, a well-timed run to meet the offside restriction, and then in this case it looks like it's a chipped finish the way David's diagrammed it, which would be a little indication of improvisation. So in our crudest interpretation of the need to penetrate, can we get it to the number 9 in front of goal, and can he or she finish?
Ian, can you just talk to the relative depth or starting positions of the number 7 and number 11? To me, that seems very critical on whether this fullback and that fullback remains tight and closer to the number 9, or has to move out and defend in wide positions, thus opening up space for the number 9.
Yeah, again, a very good question. So the freedom that 7 and 11 have when our team has possession, they have considerable freedom based on the fact that they know they have 2 and 3 behind them. So should the ball be turned over, they have cover defensively. That allows 7 and 11 to move around based on the notions of width and mobility to the game plan or as they see fit. So in this case, because 7 is high and 11 is high, they have engaged the opposing fullbacks, who have now created this big space between their centre backs. So by standing up there, they've made the opposing backline spread out a little bit. If 7 and 11 kind of ended at the point of these arrows, were more withdrawn, the 2 and 3 of the opposing team could potentially pinch in, or they might step up. But certainly the freedom of 7 and 11, based on the cover and support provided by 2 and 3, will mess up the opposing defense for sure. And then with this great field coverage that's allowed us in the 4-5-1, there should be great pockets of depth, angles of support all over the field for short passing combinations, and we should be able to really play a possession game before we can find that final penetrating pass. Clearly, if we work on the idea that 4 and 5 are stay-home players, 6 is a stay-home player, and in this case, because players develop down the right side, our 3 is a little bit more withdrawn. What we can now see is we have this ability for combination as number 2 comes on and number 7 is already wide. So now we have the potential for an overlap on this right flank. And critically, we could have the same potential over on the left flank. Interestingly also, if we can just go back one, we'll see that the number 9, to David's previous point, is pulled away to the weak side. And so now the number 9 is on the other side of the defenders. The opponents have to be aware of the ball and the combination play of 2 and 7, and they also have to find out where number 9 is potentially coming in at the back post. So the number 9's movement remains critical, even though they're not directly involved in the possession over on the flank. Our team will pivot off of this triangle, this stable triangle of 4, 5, and 6. Everything from there can really set us off in attacking shape. We see out here, nicely diagrammed with 11, that he or she has the potential to drive inside, diagonally inside or outside. They have the potential of support from 3. Similarly, over on the 2 and 7 side. And then the movement of 9, and it's quite well diagrammed here, the number 9 can certainly play in the penetrating option on the last shoulder. He or she can try to split centre backs and fullbacks, or they can check 2. And obviously, if they check 2, there's space behind them now. And here we see how 8 could potentially exploit space in behind. So a really flexible formation as we employ the system based on the characteristics of our players and our coaching predilection. We have great support again in the wide spaces. We have those 4 wide players, and we have the ability for 7, 11, 8, and 10 to come from deep positions to join in the number 9. The number 9 hopefully will keep us as high as possible. As the number 9 moves, so space is created somewhere else. So the number 9 has moved diagonally to the left. There's space now for the 7 to run into. There's maybe space for the 8 to run into. If 9 stays high, the midfielders will have a little bit more chance underneath. But as number 9 shifts either laterally or vertically back towards his or her own goal, space will be available for oncoming midfielders and certainly wide players and central. And then everything again hinges on this number 9 in our real attacking sequence. So this number 9 could be physically your strongest player, biggest, more physical player that can hold the ball up. It could be a really quick, short player who's got darting electric speed. It really depends on what you have available to you. But what we've shown here is a nice little sequence where there's been some play in the midfield from 7 to 8 to 10. And the number 9 has initially shown to the ball, and then the number 9 has spun off for a penetrating pass and a finish. And so this is the type of creativity and movement that the number 9 is always looking to exploit these little gaps, especially when the opponent gets very transfixed on the ball movement between 7, 8, and 10. This is when number 9 offensively is doing a lot of their work to try to get free for that final penetrating pass.
So Ian, we'll talk about some of the activities that go along with the principles that you've just discussed from the attacking perspective.
Sure. So this is just a pattern which most coaches will be familiar with in some capacity. And initially we set the pattern up with no opponents. the coach has a good supply of balls. We've got the key players for this point of the training. So we've got the 7, the 11, of course, the number 9, and then the 8 and 10, the 2 high central midfielders. So we've got all the right players. And all we've suggested here that there's a pass from 8 to 10. And as that pass is being made, our number 9 checks 2, our number 9 checks away, and then moves diagonally across the field to receive the pass for a finish. And you can see that 7 and 11 are just coming in to finish up rebounds and things like that. The idea of this little pattern is that the number 9, as the ball goes to the right, shows but checks away, and now their run can be across the field. They can honor offside consideration should it occur when we add in defenders, and they'll get their finish. The patterns that you can create are numerous, but we like to do some shadow play initially just to establish these potential combinations and movements.
And Ian, on this particular diagram, and you'll recall when we went through the principles and the reasons why you chose this system, as the ball moves to the right, that's a trigger for the striker actually to move in the opposite direction to create space for the number 10, even if it goes out to the number 7, and then be in a position to make room for runs forward from midfield, or in this case, a penetrating pass between the defenders.
Absolutely. So if we could just imagine for a second, let's say the number 9 just stays there, then they're killing space and they're potentially picked up by the 2 centre backs. If the number 9 initially shifts over here, as the ball shifts over here, this becomes a very difficult pass. And again, the number 9 is in the full view of the 2 centre backs. By moving away, the number 9 is achieving 2 goals. One, losing the centre back's vision, and again, giving themselves space to attack the ball. So that check away, in my mind, is a very critical part of the lone central striker's movement. We make the pattern now potentially a little bit more sophisticated, which means more timing of runs. And so we can see here, we've just created a give and go, 8 to 10 and back to 8. And then the ball's got fired out to the left. And so what we've got now is number 7 timing a run into the box. We've got number 9 making the check away again, and then the check back to the ball. And we can see how number 9 has got themselves an opportunity for a strike at goal, but also 7 is now charging in as the players develop down the left side. Of course, if this was a pattern we liked, we would set it out initially going to the left side, 2 or 3 repetitions, and then of course run the pattern, the same pattern, but out to the right-hand side as our players get more and more comfortable. And then the last one that we have here is the suggestion that the number 9 frees the 7 and 11 to get in the space behind. So we've seen again this little 8 to 10. 9 has checked 2 aggressively, hopefully, potentially brought defenders with him or her, and a combination has been played. And what's critical with this is that 7 and 11 have determined that there is now space vacated behind the number 9 who has checked forward. And you can appreciate this is very difficult for defenders, be they top-level professionals or youth. When a natural mark goes into the midfield, do we follow or do we stay? And if our natural marks are not maintaining their width, but are now starting to make diagonal runs, do we pass them on or do we follow them? So this type of movement, if it's proactive, really challenges the organization and the communication of a defensive unit. And again, everything on the offensive side of the ball is hopefully proactive.
And Ian, it's although a very, very simple activity, there's a lot of sophistication that goes into this pattern. With the number 8 initiating the move to the 10, that should trigger a movement essentially of every player on the field to adjust their position. So with time, and certainly it's going to take some time, the coach needs to imprint their patterns and help each player understand that as the ball moves, their movement and their decision-making changes.
And this is, it's difficult to maintain technical quality when there's no opponent. So you have to be a little bit patient, and more than anything, you're establishing the pattern, not the technical execution. As you start to layer in 1 or 2 defenders, then the technique will rise. So whilst technique is always important and should be emphasized, the key here is more the pattern and the technical implications will come out as we bring in pressure. This is a nice little activity, be it 11v11, full field, whatever you've got available to you. But the idea of this is to emphasize the value of the twin flank players in the 4-5-1, which would be similar to the 4-4-2, but I think it's a little different in the 4-5-1 because of that central striker alone. And so this activity works essentially in possession. The attacking team can have one guy go wide, and then they can receive a ball out there. If one opponent or one attacker goes wide, one defender can come across. And as soon as we get a 1v1, then a second wide player can come into the space. So just to recap, we start off with a 1v nobody. It very quickly becomes a 1v1. And then we open it up to the potential of a 2v1 in the wing space to practice this notion of getting it wide and exploiting wide space with numerical advantage.
And this is a very relevant practice, Ian, for this particular formation, given that we have two players on either side starting in those wide positions. Yeah,
and it's the wide players are even more freed up because of the three central midfielders. If it's a 4-4-2, they have a much more robust, clearer defensive responsibility. So there's greater freedom in the 4-5-1 for the 7 and 11 to break forward in possession. And what we've seen now is that the support of number 2, and we're still in this 2v1 mode, compromises the fullback. He or she has to honor the fact that there's the potential of number 2 receiving a drop pass or overlapping. And in this case, our 7 has not chosen to pass it back. They have not had an overlap to play. They could have driven inside, but they did what a really true winger does, and that's drive to the end line. And assuming they're right-footed on the right side, which is a pretty fair assumption in most high levels all the way down to youth, if they can sling in good crosses with an outswing, as shown here, and hopefully our number 9, our central striker, can head the ball. So in this case, let's get our wingers, if they are indeed wingers, let's have them attack the byline. But that ability to attack is certainly assisted by having the potential of number 2 there in support. And finally, the other option is that we get the overlap. So we see that 7 has driven in, created space for the 2, and the 2 has driven in a near post cross in this particular instance. And one of the things we've done to make the training increasingly more realistic, we went from the 1 in the wing space to a 1v1 to allow a second attacker in, and now we've allowed a second defender in. So now you're getting 2v2s in the wing space. You're making it more challenging for the attackers, but hopefully you've established success early on, and now you're getting closer and closer to the real game.
And our third activity, Ian?
Yeah. So this activity is really about trying to get from one end of the grid, in this case where our number 4 is, and have one of our players penetrate into the final zone. That's the game. So what you see is we've got a 3v3 in the middle. There's our 6, 8, and 10. Those are our regular guys. And in this case, we've got 1, 2, 3 reds. And we've got the 2 and the 3 out in these free flank areas. And what we're trying to do is use this numerical advantage, because you've got 3 in the middle, you've got 4 on the outside with no opponent. So it's actually a 7v3 initially. And it's how can we get 6, 8, and 10 to get into that end zone ultimately in possession. That's the objective of the activity.
And I think it's worth mentioning the relevance of the high position of the fullbacks. So these could have been 7 and 11, but we chose to put in 3 and 2 because in this formation, we would like to try and get our 3 and our number 2 high in support of the midfield line, which would then allow us to push our number 11 and our number 7 even higher.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, if we're using the entire squad, this could equally be the number 11 and number 7 on our team in the opposed situation. But to David's point, we want to get 2 and 3 beyond the number 6 in the real game. And so if we can encourage 2 and 3 to run this sideline, getting ahead of the 6, our holding central midfielder, that would be optimum. we've shown a nice sequence now as we remember that the wide players cannot be challenged right now. A straightforward pass up to our target. And what we've seen here is that the target has received good support. So as that ball is traveling into number 9, number 10 has come across and supported for the drop pass, and number 8 has made a run onto the weak side, received a pass and dribbled in. And so that's a very clear example of how simple this activity can be in terms of being successful. Support, we've got good width, we've got unity, yet another way of potentially skinning the cat, as it were. So we've gone into the midfield, up and back. And so this is an up, back and through with a longer floated ball. And now this is a pass. This is a received pass. So this long ball is received by the 8, who has made a timed run off the ball to receive it. And what we would do here is we would make this line essentially an offside line. So we wouldn't want 8 to be standing in the end zone. We want them to be arriving in the end zone to collect the ball. And as you can see in this case, we haven't used the number 9. The number 9 hasn't been a necessary player in the target play. We've been able to skip them and just play a big expansive ball into the wing space.
So Ian, we'll talk about the coaching in the game methodology as it pertains now to the defending principles of play. Sure.
So again, really important to me. And I really hope that all of our coaches involved in enjoying the series are comfortable with these concepts. So as the first player on the ball is looking to penetrate, the first opponent to the ball should be looking to apply some form of pressure, be it to destroy the attack, deny the attack, or delay the attack. Subsequent players to the player applying pressure are providing cover or help, and this is to counter off the support of the opposing attackers. As the opposing attackers are looking to use width and mobility to stretch us, we should be looking defensively off the ball to balance off the threat of the ball, opponents, and space, and always looking to get compact. And if the special source of attacking is improvisation and creativity, good stoic defenders like myself, we have to demonstrate patience, discipline, and restraint, and not fall for some of the tricks and dipsy-doos of the opponent, and actually just be good, solid defenders and do the basics in terms of trying to prevent a goal and ultimately winning the ball back. When we look now at the opportunities provided to us in this system, or in this formation as we make it a system, is we have the ability to get a lot of numbers around the ball quite quickly if our 1-4-5-1 is set up well. And you can see here that we could potentially, the number 11 could force the play outside by getting up here on this side of the ball. But in the picture we've shown here, 11 and 10 have come pressing high. The player in the possession can't go down the line. He can't go across the park. And we've just forced him to go, potentially just get stalled here. You can see he's been stalled as the pressure has come. So now we've turned him around and we've actually turned him potentially back into the number 9. So it's very difficult to see how this goalkeeper could distribute the ball with this picture and find the free player very easily. Certainly, as the ball is traveling, we can see the white line movement, and the players have been making the movement across to press, and we can dictate play very effectively in the 1-4-5-1 with good pressure. We certainly now need to consider how the support is played. So what we've got here is we've got great horizontal lines through our team defensively, and equally we've got some vertical lines on our team as well. So we've got some different ways that we can effectively press the ball. In the case of the number 9, I really don't want that number 9 exerting a ton of energy trying to chase the ball. They've got a bigger responsibility when we've got it. And so we can see here, the ball's wide, 7 is goal side, good pressure, 2 has come across to cover, 6 has come across to cover. In this case, 8 and 10 would just drop in. The alternative, of course, is that 6 could remain between the 4 and 5, and 8 and 10 could get across. But again, great field coverage and easy to establish 1v1 and then critically make it 2v1s, maybe even 3v1s. A nice job here by David of just connecting the players by the lines. So the line of the back four, I like to call it sort of a hockey stick or half a smiley face. The 2 has to be high because this is where the ball is. 4 and 5 are connected, and 3 will have to just drop a little bit to keep us connected across the park. But you'll also see that 3 is no longer marking an opponent. They're actually balancing off the threat of the opponent, the threat of space, and they're aware of where the ball is. So I would say 3's got a great balance position. In the case of the midfield, what David's been able to demonstrate is 7 pressing, 11 staying connected to 3, and then we've got this nice triangle of 8 and 10, which I would say is our basic triangle for supporting both offensively and defensively. So I think this is a pretty nice demonstration of how balance could be impacted in this type of defending from wide. Once again, we've gone back to our circles to suggest that initially we could get all of our team in this red circle as a starting position where we establish our restraining line. If we can get our team into that sort of space of the red circle, that circle may shift left and right, up and down, but we've got our team very compact. And the blue circle suggests that should we win it inside the red, how quickly can we spread out and transition into offensive opportunity, be it by passing backwards or forwards. Again, so having this idea of what the type of distances between players should be in and out of possession could be very helpful to youth players. And sometimes you just have them identify their relative space off of, say, the width of the goal or the width of the penalty area. So there's lots of markings on the field that can help a youth coach show the players the types of spacing they should be looking for. Again, the idea here is of effective delay and deny. And so what we've seen is, as the ball has gone out to the left fullback, we've got good pressure. And that pressure has forced the opponent back and across. But as that's happened, you can see here how 9 is shunted and 11 is shunted. So we're actually predicting this. We're actually saying to the opponent in this case, you can try to play out to the left, but we're going to deny it. And we want you to play across us, keep everything in front, and then we'll come and press on the side that we want to. So quite good restraint here on the part of the defensive team, the numbered team, the yellow scrimmage vest team. They've got everybody back behind the ball, including the number 9, and they are now starting to force play. So the opponents can't go here because 7's pressure is good. They go across, and then we've got our team ready to defend on a side of the park that we feel comfortable with. So this would be my example, or an example of how restraint could be really critical as a team concept.
So Ian, let's talk about some of the activities that coaches may use to teach the principles of play as it relates to defending.
Yeah, so the first thing we want to think about is the importance of the uniqueness of the formation. And one of the unique things about this formation is that we have 5 midfielders. So in this case, we're playing a 6-goal game. We're working with the red team, and we've put in our 6 and our 8 and our 10, our central midfielders. We've also put in our 2 flank players, 7 and 11. And we've additionally given them a target player that they would, should they win the ball, they would play to the target player, bounce it off, and try to finish on one of the 3 goals. So that's our 5. We've got our 5 defending the full width of this field because of the 6 goals. And we're anticipating and looking to emphasize the value of our formation that the opposing midfield has 4, just 4. So we've got a 5v4 to 6 goals in the middle, and we've got this target player for red, and we've got the target player for white as well. Numerical advantage, which we would typically expect if we play a 4-5-1 in the real game. And what we've captured nicely is the ability of the team to shift. So as the ball has come off of what was our right flank into the opponent, we see that 11 has come inside to pressure, and 8 has done a great job of tracking to the outside just in case the ball gets switched out there. So we've seen how 8 and 11 have potentially exchanged positions briefly to defend this effectively. As this ball is being played and 8 and 11 are working out how to defend the immediate situation with pressure and cover, 10 and 6 are also moving across to balance off the threat to this central goal. I think we can see here pretty clearly that if this ball is played, we'd be concerned about that goal, a little bit concerned about that goal, and far less concerned about that one, hence the movement of the players and leaving the weak side somewhat less protected. And of course, things are great when we win the ball. So the pressure was good from 11. 10 and 6 were connected. A turnover was achieved. The ball was played to 6, or 6 came out with it, hits the target, third man run of number 7, and we score a goal. So now our defending is transitioning into attacking because we've got the right 5 players on the field in addition to this target player. And so we're demonstrating how our attacking patterns can still come from effective defending if we can keep our relative shape in the midfield 5. Moving on to another little activity where we would look to, again, stack our defenders to make sure that we've got the right type of numerical situation that we might see in the game. So in this case, we've given ourselves our 2 centre-backs and the 3 central midfielders. The idea of this game being is that we're going to do everything in our power to defend centrally and make the opponent play wide, but hopefully not penetrate. And we've got a 5v3 in the middle, and then the white team has these neutral wide players who they can play through, and we'll see how that comes in here in this next picture. So what we can see is that we've had the ball played in, or from 6, excuse me, to the target, and as the ball has been played forward, it's broken the line of our midfield, but our 10 has checked back, our 5 has checked up, our 4 has shifted across. And so as the ball is traveling here, and even if the opponent has indeed broken a line of pressure, we still double down and we move and shift across. So I like the way here that our 4 and 5 have kept central, but they've got a little bit staggered. And I really like the idea that the number 10 has been willing to double down, and hopefully the number 8 will get into this space too. Challenges for us now. Again, the opponent has been trying to go through us centrally. Even if they had gone wide, they have to come back to the center at some point. And so here we see how 5 has won it. The pressure from 10 from the weak side is now rewarded by a pass in transition and then quickly into our target. So hopefully, by putting these relationships together, 4 and 5, 6, 8, and 10, not only do we learn to defend together, but we can also learn how we might attack together.
And Ian, one of the things to mention in this activity, we're trying to prevent the opponent from getting the ball out to the wide players, not because we don't have plenty of defensive cover there, because we've talked about having potentially the 2 and the 7 on one side and the 3 and 11 on the other side, but we are trying to force the ball inside, so when we do win a turnover, the distance to goal and the strength of our team with the number 9 being very central, that gives us the best scoring opportunity off a counter.
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges is that in youth soccer, we very often say force the opponent outside. And that might be totally appropriate for the players you have, the formation you play, and the way you impose your system. But clearly, if I was able to put out a 4-5-1, I want a lot of the opponent's play trying to attack my 6, 8, and 10, where I have incredibly great depth. So yes, indeed, in this case, we'd be trying to get the play to come inside as opposed to outside if we possibly could.
So let's have a look at the next and slightly different scenario of actually trying to force the play outside.
Yeah, so what we've done now is we've given we've set up in what we might call a phase of play. And what you'll notice is that we're missing 2 players from the yellow team, which would be pretty typical if you've got less than a 22-player squad. So the players that we've omitted are 8 and 10. Those 2 players are missing from our 9-player team. And what we do in this phase of play is the coach will start the ball and he'll give it to the opponent. And the clear challenge right now is without 8 and 10, 7 and 11 are going to have to come across to help. That's the key. They can't afford to stay wide as they would in a typical 11v11 scenario. And so what we're training our 7 and 11 to do is identify where there is threat and manage the threat rather than just hold their position. Because if 7 just holds here and 11 just holds here, this player is not a threat, this player is not a threat. The real threat is that number 6 is exposed 2v1. So depending on which players we sacrifice, we can start teaching different implications of the system and how we need our team to shift defensively when we see a player potentially out of position. And what we've got here is, as 7 and 11 have indeed pinched in to support or cover number 6, that has made the opponent play backwards. We would consider that a negative pass. And as the opponent plays backwards, it does encourage our number 3 to step up, because the ball has gone backwards. They have time to now come and press where we could reasonably anticipate the ball would be played. We'd probably also, and I think it's demonstrated here, want 4 and 5 to shift across a little bit. So again, the effective movement of 7 and 11 supporting number 6 forces the ball back and allows 3 to cheat up and put extra pressure on. So we can actually step increasingly higher by continually turning the opponent back, by pressure arriving at the ball as the ball is played or the ball arrives at the feet of the opponent. And of course, as is our way with supporting our favorite formations and systems, we see success here by the number 3. Number 9 has maintained the high position, and 7 was in an advanced position and actually pinched in a little bit. So now they can join in at the far post, and 2 would give us our natural width. So if we're effective in team pressure around the field, we're not pressing and defending so much as to stop the opponent scoring. We're actually pressing to win the ball, to have more ball, to get more goal scoring opportunities. So that would be a positive take on why we defend. That's to get more soccer balls into the back of the opponent's net and have more possession and more fun.
So Ian, we're going to go through now a summary of the main points, and we're going to first look at attacking and then the defending.
Thanks, David. There are some people that would contend that you have 4 in the back and what you do with the other 6 is somewhat irrelevant. Or you play with 3 in the back and it's the other 7 that you sort of just work out with. I would disagree with that general thesis and suggest to you that a 4-5-1 can look radically different and has potential pros and cons over a 4-4-2, as much as a 4-3-3 has a different potential pros and cons to, say, a 4-2-3-1. So what I really like about this system, formation to system, is that there are quite explicit functional roles for the players. And you can then further interpret those on the physical and technical characteristics of your players. But if you use the traditional numbering system, be it the kid has 68 on his or her back, if they're the right back, then they're the number 2. Their job is to defend, support the number 7, and then go from there. The number 9, based on their physical characteristics, engage the back line, and then either look to score big, expansive, play big and expansively, or check 2 and bring people into the game. In most of our teams, we have people that want to play forwards, but we're inundated with midfielders, like-minded midfielders who want to play centrally or wide. So 5 in the midfield tends to accommodate a lot of our potential talent pool. And certainly in the 4-5-1, I could make the case that it doesn't specifically favor central attacking over wide or vice versa. So as you lay out your formation, you lay out your players, you look at how you want to exploit the opponent, I think you can find different ways in the 4-5-1 to come at the opponent from both central positions and wide attacking positions equally. In the 4-5-1, we can drop deep and restrain. If we do that, we have good a space to attack into when we win the ball. By the same token, if we leave that number 9 in a high position and we're defending quite deep, we have an outlet. We always have an outlet. The trick is, can we support that outlet? So sometimes we leave our 9 high and he or she becomes our outlet, and we try to support them when we win the ball as quickly as possible. Other times we bring the number 9 back with us to help our defending block, and then we obviously have to pass our way out of out of pressure if we win possession to counter. So we might be able to possess in counter pressing, we might be able to go direct, or we may have to build our way out depending on what we do with the number 9. And he or she, that number 9, focal point of all our attacking ideas, in my opinion. In the defending, as an ex-centre-back myself, I like to see my centre-backs be focused on the primary role of protecting the goal, helping the rest of the team win the ball so we can go off and attack. And the screening number 6, and in some teams you'll see that they'll play with essentially 2 number 6s, but if you've got a good quality holding midfielder, the life of 4 and 5 becomes quite easy, and 4 and 5 are quite happy to see their fullbacks push on because they know they have the central cover of the number 6. When we have, be it in a 4-4-2 or a 4-5-1, when we have those 7 and 11s with the 2s and 3s, we have a lot of good cover on the wide spaces. So we are well protected in the wide spaces. We should always have the ability to have 2 defenders get across. Sometimes if you play, for example, a 4-3-3 and the central midfield is tight, the distance between your high forward and your fullback leaves your fullback exposed. That's potentially a weakness of the 4-3-3. In this case, in the 4-5-1, your 7 and 11 should very often be connected to the 2 and 3 defensively. We may let the opponent build out in the 1-4-5-1 if we choose to drop off a little bit deeper. But in doing so, we make our team compact. We allow the opponent, to have the ball in a place that doesn't really hurt us and encourage them to come into us. And if we do win it, we have a lot of space to counterattack into. So I would be okay in the 1-4-5-1, occasionally dropping our pressure block down for the point of view of being compact and also counterattacking. If we are losing, we have the ability, of course, to step the whole unit up and try to press higher. But I would also say that even if we're down a goal, sometimes dropping off, maintaining the good integrity of the defending block, and then pressing to counter could be equally effective in chasing the game. So depending on how you choose to employ the formation and system, I think you can use it intelligently to protect a lead and or chase a deficit. Again, depending on where you defend, how you set it up, and then how you look to counter. Good communication would really apply to any intelligent formation and system. We need our centre-backs talking. We need our goalkeeper connected. We need the integrity of the number 6, and we need players willing to work on both sides of the ball. But communication on the defending side of things, certainly verbal communication particularly, should always be emphasized. And then effective use of the back 4, especially when our weak side fullbacks are paying attention, engaged, and we have decent ARs. If we don't have VAR, that's probably understood, but we have decent assistant referees. Let's use the offside rule as part of our defending tools. So if we get pressure on the ball, we turn the opponent back, a good opportunity to step up. If we drop too deep and give the opponent too much space, they can run into all kinds of places because offside doesn't apply. So I do think offside is a condition, a rule and a game condition we should be looking to emphasize a lot when we play with a back 4 in a zonal setup.
Well, thank you, Ian, for this great presentation on the 1-4-5-1 system. And thank you, coaches, for joining us. Hopefully, you'll have the opportunity by looking at all 4 presentations to decide which system fits best for you.